Welcome to The Line. Voter turnout was higher in the 2017 Albuquerque city elections this week. Now there were 8 candidates on the ballot for mayor. 2 will move on to a runoff election in a few weeks. And here with me to discuss the outcomes of the election are Andy Lyman with the NM Political Report. Albuquerque Journal reporter Dan McKay is here. Merritt Allen of Vox Optima LLC is with us, and attorney Sophie Martin, one of our regulars, is here as well. Let's start with the mayor's race and turnout. Dan, I mentioned turnout pretty substantial when you really think about what's been going on. In fact, your paper, the Journal, had a chart showing the fall of turnout from the late 90s to now. What do you attribute the big turnout to? What was in the air that got people out there?
Well, I think that, it's a very politically charged environment. There certainly is a lot of energy and motivation among Democrats and progressives in particular. We also had a pretty controversial ballot measure that went before voters, dealing with the sick leave ordinance. So there were a lot of reasons for people to turn out.
Exactly right. Sophie, Dan mentions progressives. They did turn out. Your thought on that? It's
they
interesting.
did. I think part of what was interesting is that it was hard to predict this level of turnout while we were still in the early voting period. And I'm going to float the slightly crackpot theory that came out this weekend too. When you look at election trends, we had a pretty big bump in mayoral votes post 9/11.
Right.
And I think that there can be a tendency when something like what just happened in Las Vegas happens for people to say, "What can I do right now? I feel, impotent. I can't make a change here, but at least I can show up on election day and cast my ballot." And so I don't know that there's a ton of there, but that's my current little theory.
It's out there. Yeah, it's out there. Yeah, Merritt, I've heard the same.
People are looking for something to do.
It's the one thing you can do as a citizen is get out and vote, and even if it's not a referendum issue, just get out there and vote.
Unless you live in the East Mountains as I do, and so I did not vote.
Right, exactly.
But no, I think very much the political climate. I think ballot initiatives not only increase voter turnout, they skew voter turnout.
Right.
And I think we certainly saw that with. I guess can we say Democrat and Republican candidates in this nonpartisan election, or should we
sort of know who we mean? Don't we?
Yeah, because you saw really the Democrats took most of the votes. And I think the ballot initiative had an awful lot to do with that.
Exactly
and
right.
It's extra money, it's extra notice, it's extra activity going in to bring out the electorate.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and both of you mentioned that as well, all three, rather. We're going to handle that in the second part, this workforce thing, because it's worthy of a separate discussion. Let's get to some candidates. Andy Lyman, interestingly, when you look at the results, the one that jumps out to me and a lot of people is the young man Gus Pedrotti out of UNM, just under 7% of the votes. And there's something in the air with Gus Pedrotti. And I'm wondering if you all think that he actually unleashed perhaps first-time voters, perhaps younger voters, and we all know, we tend to skew very much older in the electorate for voters in a mayoral race. I'm interested in your thoughts on Gus Pedrotti and the campaign that he ran.
Anecdotally, I think he actually polled some non-college voters. I've seen a lot of social media posts from older voters, or just non-college voters, I should say. I think he has shown that we can look to young people. I mean, he had some ideas that other politicians have said, look, that just won't work. We appreciate you're thinking outside the box, but it's just not going to work. His idea for legalizing cannabis on the city level. But I think it also, in a way, it was kind of the Bernie Sanders thing, like, oh, wait a minute, let's look at it a different way.
Right.
I think that also hindered him because people are saying, well, you can think of it that way, it just won't work.
Right.
But I think it energized people, and I think every time somebody heard him talk, they thought, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He's not just a 22-year-old
Exactly.
just trying to have fun.
Exactly. The word of mouth thing around Gus was really interesting, wasn't it? People talked so effusively and positively about him.
It was, and it seemed to me from what I saw on social media is that you did see this cluster of people, younger people who may or may not turn out for the runoff. But I also saw people who I would have pegged as Tim Keller voters who voted for Pedrotti. Now, whether that was, I feel confident that Keller has enough to get to the runoff, and so almost trading my vote to give Gus a bump, or whether they will now shift to Keller is a good question. I mean, I think it's worth noting that if most of Brian Cologne's voters vote for Keller, then he's well over the 50%. If some of those Pedrati voters show up as well to vote for Tim Keller, then I think we can be pretty confident he'll
That's a
get
good point. That's an interesting point there when you think about it, Dan, that there's a lot of moving pieces now with these last two. And with Mr. Keller, we would assume there's some natural constituencies that might come his way, but maybe we shouldn't make that assumption. There's some things about Dan Lewis I want to get to in a second, but for Tim Keller, going away just under 40%, that was a heck of a throwdown. When you really think about an 8-person race, that's an enormous number when you think about it. Does it bode as an automatic for this runoff, or is there something else afoot here that we need to keep aware of?
I wouldn't consider it automatic.
Okay.
It's always difficult to predict who will turn out for a special runoff election like this. But certainly, it was definitely a strong showing in a very large field. I think that he will probably have home field advantage, so to speak, in the runoff, given that Albuquerque is growing more and more Democratic leaning.
Right.
Lewis's challenge will be to present himself as someone who's not just a Republican, but someone who maybe a label doesn't fit. He will try to appeal to Democrats, candidates.
He has to pinch Democrats to make this thing work, doesn't he?
You
at some
can't
point?
win an Albuquerque mayoral election without support from Democrats in
Right.
some way.
Interesting there. Brian Colon, when you really think about it, it came in at 16.38% of the, for his, what was it, 800,000, whatever he was spending on it. That's not a lot of votes for that amount of money if you really think about it. What happened there for Brian Colon? And then also, same question, was votes automatically flipped to Mr. Keller, or is there something there for Mr. Lewis to work from as well?
Well, I found that very interesting because it seemed to me that this was almost more of a race between Keller and Colon than anyone else.
Right.
And then if you look at the real totals and the public funding plus the PAC plus the PR firm, Keller was spending about the same amount of money as Colon, so they were evenly matched there. Reports I've seen say that Keller really had the ground game going.
Yes.
And I think he had better name recognition being already in state office, so it was an easier brand. I don't see. But I'm also not inside the Democratic Party. I don't see the disconnect between the Colon supporters and the Keller supporters that we see with Lewis and Johnson.
I see.
And that's, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge for Lewis is convincing the Johnson voters to come out for the runoff.
Why would that be a challenge instead of a natural flow that way?
For some reason in this state, Republicans are really good at hating each other. We have so many divisions at the state level and now at the municipal level. I wasn't even aware of it until this election, but I found it's the attack ads for Johnson against Lewis not just shocking, but kind of obnoxious. And there is a voter who that type of ad appeals to.
Right.
And if Lewis isn't their guy, they're not going to support him.
Gotcha. I hear that. Just a couple of minutes left on this, Andy Lyman. The idea that Mr. Keller now has a field staff of, I've heard about 600 people who are now seasoned. They've got a win under their belt. That infrastructure advantage is no joke. You can't just build that kind of thing in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Talk about that. How does Mr. Lewis go up against machinery like that?
I don't know. I think Merritt touched on some of this too. That Tim Keller does have other things happening besides his campaign.
Right.
He does have a private campaign firm. I mean, I'm assuming Dan Lewis does as well. But there's a lot happening there. There's a lot of volunteers. There is a lot of people that are like really gung-ho about Tim Keller, and I think you might see a lot of people come out now from Colon's camp saying, "Do you want some people to knock on doors? Do you want,
As a former party chair, you'd think that would be a natural.
I did see,
offer,
and
yeah.
Merritt touched on something interesting too, that most of the negative ads that I saw were from between Dan Lewis and Wayne Johnson. I don't know how you reconcile that and say, let's let bygones be bygones and come support us after I've just said all these awful things about.
That's right. Dan, do you predict, as others are, that this could be a real nasty campaign, that the only chance for Dan Lewis is to turn off Democrats from showing up, literally, and the only way to do that is to throw a lot of bombs? Is that a winning strategy in this environment?
It's difficult to say. I don't know exactly what his strategy will be, but yes, every campaign it seems like it's nastier than the last. So I would not be surprised if voters hear a lot of negative ads now that we're down to just two candidates and people can pick over their records. Keller in particular has already faced some pretty harsh ads linking him to some pretty terrible stuff, discredited ads, but certainly it could be a negative campaign.
That's a good point.
It's
Please.
interesting you say that because during, in the hours after the close of the election, we were already hearing Dan Lewis pick up some of the themes from some of those ads when he was talking about the race. And so it seems to me that it has already begun. Certainly of the two, Keller has less need to go negative than Dan Lewis does in order to try and make some moves.
That's right. The Hug a Thug campaign is already out there from the Lewis folks. When we come back to the line, we'll talk more about the outcome of this 2017 Albuquerque municipal election, including the previously mentioned sick leave proposal.